by the time you watch this video, there's a 25% chance that Boris Johnson already has died. This would be tragic. And I know you don't want to hear this right now, but it is also tragic that thousands of other people are dying each day. And I know how hard it is if a person you feel you know, because you have seen him so many times on TV for so many years, dies. You really feel you have a connection to that person. When Kobe died, it really hit me hard. I cried over him in front of my computer. Nobody saw this, nobody will ever know. But yeah, you feel you have known him for 20 years and it really feels different, you know. Yeah. Having said that, let's discuss what this means for the other leaders around the world. Good news from the editing studio. I just read in the news that Boris Johnson is actually feeling better. Increases the likelihood of him surviving from 75 to more than 75 at least.
He's been moved to intensive care. Does that give you and the Vice President any pause or additional concerns, steps that you're taking to preserve the continuity of government here?
No, I don't.
Now that question is so wrong. Why would Trump change whatever he's doing to protect himself just because someone he actually knows and is friends with now has a worse than average outcome? There's no new information here that he did not know about. Now the fact that Boris Johnson did contract the virus is relevant, and we're going to look at that in a moment. Let's realize that an expert like Trump is not going to base his decision on the fact that it got personal for him.
Seen things that I've never seen before. I mean, I've seen them, but I've seen them on television in faraway lands. I've never seen them in our country.
Seriously though, that is what a lot of people actually are doing. It's just human nature. People also keep mentioning that now that they see what happened in Italy, now we're gonna take this serious. Well, they should have seen that in China already. Now, the questions that are of real interest are in how much danger are our leaders actually? Are they actually more likely to contract the virus than the average person? Are they more likely to get sick than the average healthcare worker, for example? And what happens if they do get it? How dangerous is it specifically to them? And also, besides it being a tragedy like every death that occurs, how big of an impact is it for the society as a whole if the leader of the country actually dies? Is it worse than if a doctor dies, for example? And we're gonna get to all of those questions right now. Now, to answer the question, how likely is it that our leaders are gonna contract the virus? We have to look at how likely it is that a random person like you and me are gonna contract the virus in the world. So we have to find out how many cases are there actually at the moment. If you go by the reported cases number, there is a lot of not reported cases number. So this number is not accurate at all. The thing is, the number of leaders actually infected is probably rather accurate, besides like tests not, because they get tested. I mean, some countries might not report it, but they get tested. Not everybody in the normal population does get tested. So really you have to find out how many cases are there, how many unknown cases are there. To get a feel for that, I'm gonna look at how many deaths per 1 million population is there currently in the world at this stage. Because deaths are usually reported. At least it's a better estimate than the reported cases. So at the current time we have 1.4 million reported cases and 82,000 deaths. 82,000 deaths in the world is 10 of 1 million of the whole world population. That's the good news for now. Or 0.001%. Those are the people that died of the whole world population. Now, if you assume a death rate of 1% and don't even get me started on how I come up with that assumption and not something else, let's just go with it for simplicity's sake. Now that would mean that 0.1% or 1 in 1,000 was infected of the whole world. Roughly 25 days ago, because that's when those people that now have died were infected. The people that got infected after this have not died yet, so you can't draw any conclusion from that. So that means 8.2 million actual cases were in the world around 20-25 days ago. A little bit more than the 1.4 million actually reported. Now obviously if you assume a death rate of 2%, that halves, but let's just go with it for now. If we further assume a doubling time of 10 days, again a rough estimation, but it will do the trick, and also assume that if a leader gets infected, it gets to the public eyes, like from infection, 5 days to symptoms, and then 5 days again until they get tested, and then it goes to the public. It's roughly 10 days. So really you have to get a 10-day lag. So in those 10 days, the cases are actually doubling. That's a rough assumption. You probably can assume that the cases right now are roughly more like 16 million or 0.2% of the world population. Now, do leaders have a higher chance than 0.2% at the moment? To answer that, how many leaders are there in the world? There's 180 countries that actually have cases of COVID-19 and 195 countries as a whole. So assume every country has one leader. Not counting vice presidents, not counting kings and so on, unless they are the leader, like one leader per country. And how many leaders are actually infected? So I started researching this and I expected there would be a couple of them, because you hear all that, like here Vice President Bear and Senator Bra. It's all roughly 200 countries and only one infected, Boris Johnson. That is the only leader right now. I did not find any other for the current recording. So that is 0.5% of leaders actually have contracted the coronavirus compared to the 0.2 of the world population. That would be the estimate. So you could say, okay, leaders seem to be more likely to get the coronavirus. But now we get to the point where it is important that the fact that Boris Johnson has it plays a role, contracted the virus, because without him, the percentage of leaders having the coronavirus would be 0. Obviously 200 is not a big sample size, so you can't draw that many conclusions. Also, you have to consider the fact that I wouldn't be making this video if Boris Johnson wouldn't have been infected. There wouldn't be no discussion about it. So this is called survivorship bias, and I certainly hope that is not an inappropriate thing to say at the moment. Yeah, but even if you consider the survivorship bias effect with the only one case we have, and we wouldn't talk about it, the one case actually happening increases the likelihood that there's two possibilities, right? Or three actually. Either leaders are as likely as other people, normal people, to get the virus, or they are less likely, or they're more likely. And the fact that Boris Johnson has it does increase the chance a little bit. Yeah, the scenario of leaders being more likely to have the virus increases a little bit. If there would be no leader right now infected, then it could still be the scenario where basically leaders don't get infected at all because people are so careful, blah 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 blah. The case with Boris Johnson shows that this is not the case. And even if this falls into this category, this is still not likely. So, well, all in all, we can tell that leaders are also humans and they can get infected. And we cannot really make any assumptions with a sample size of 200 about the fact that they are less likely or more likely to get infected. But what about all those stories you hear in the news that also tricked me actually to think there were more leaders infected? You hear all the time, like Merkel got quarantined, Trump was in contact with someone, then Vice President blah and Senator blah. But here's the thing, like there's just so many groups that there's a lot of politicians. If you could also see all the politicians as a group, but there's a different thing from leaders. And also, if I would take then, okay, maybe we look at also the vice presidents, but then I would take in this group into account just because there were cases. So that would bias my sample. And about Trump and Merkel getting in contact with people, did you get in contact with someone that actually had the virus? Maybe, maybe not. Do you know someone that got in contact with an actual person? You probably do. There's a high likelihood that you actually do, because every person probably knows around 100 people, 150 people. That's like the 200 leaders in the world, and one or two of them getting in contact with someone is not really telling you much. Also, with 200 people, you just have a sampling issues that there could easily be, by chance, several more or less leaders actually infected by now, besides the survivorship bias issue that I was talking about. So we really don't know. As for the healthcare worker probability to get the virus, in Spain over 14% of the actual cases are healthcare workers. In Spain, there might also be an underreporting factor of 5 to 10. That is not the case with healthcare workers. So you probably have somewhere like 1 or 2% of the actual cases, not cases, but actually infected people are healthcare workers. The question is, how many percentage of the population is healthcare workers? And that's not a lot of them. So you can clearly see that they have a lot higher risk to get it than the normal population. Also, if you look at reports from Italy, they say they all have it actually and keep working. So healthcare workers, thank you very much. Surprisingly, roughly 1% of people are nurses or doctors in Spain. So depending on the underreporting issue, hospital staff has a 2 to 14 times chance of getting infected. Again, thank you. So, how dangerous is it for world leaders to get COVID-19? They are all humans after all, right? So it should be similar? Well, not quite. The average age of world leaders is actually 65 years old. Now that sounds bad, but if you look at the statistics, this is only where the likelihood of dying actually ramps up. So if you look at the statistics in the imperial study, there's a 2.2% chance that a 60 to 69-year-old will die if he contracts the virus, compared to the, I think 0.9 was what they assumed for the whole population. So they do have an increased risk just because they are older, most likely. By the way, doing this research, I found out that my country, Austria, has the youngest leader in the world, Sebastian Kurz. So we're safe. But for every Sebastian Kurz out there, there's also a lot of 80, 70-year-old leaders that actually have a really, really high chance of dying to this. So, besides this being a tragedy if a leader of a country dies, it also has an impact on the whole country, right? I mean, everybody knows him at the very least. You would think, like, he is the most important person in the country and might have economic impact. The next leader might change things that have huge impact on the country. However, consider there might be something changing with a new leader, and this is a big impact. So the decisions are really important. But can we really say that the leader that is coming after this leader is going to do worse decisions than the current leader? On what basis? Like, he might do better. He might do worse. Can we really tell? Is the current leader really that qualified compared to the vice leader that comes up next? The elected leader is most likely just the guy that spends more marketing in the election. In non-democratic countries, I would imagine the impact is even larger. The more powerful your leader is, the bigger the impact of a leader change is. However, can we really judge that the next leader is going to do worse? The big thing here is definitely the emotional loss for everybody in the country, like 80 million people in Germany, for example, or 365 people in the United States. And if Trump would die, then it's not only the US, like everybody in the world knows those leaders, right? So a lot of people would feel very, very sorry for that. But unfortunately, in these times, there's a lot of suffering anyway. So people might just have lost their brother or friend, and those people are obviously closer to them than the leader. Now compare this to a doctor or a nurse. If they get sick and die, this is also a tragedy. less people will know about it. A leader can be replaced, a doctor cannot. And both are human beings that cannot be replaced whatsoever, actually. So how can leaders protect themselves or be protected? Well, it's rather easy for them actually to keep working while protecting themselves. Angela Merkel was doing it for 14 days. I would imagine you can do most stuff per video or have a very safe distance. Boris Johnson, he had a meeting with someone, a scientist, actually one of the authors of the imperial college study, who also contracted the virus days before he contracted the virus. So my understanding is that he got it from him. And obviously that was really, really important to meet him. This changed everything. The whole lockdown you see around the world, it was probably because of that imperial college study. He met with Boris Johnson, and since then he convinced Boris Johnson to change the course and save a lot of lives. So that was really important to meet with him. But also you can meet persons and stay at a safe distance. You don't have to shake their hands.
I shook hands with everybody.
So world leaders can be protected like you and I can, and they can also work while they are protected, not necessarily as you and I. Also, lately testing got better and better. There are now faster tests. Actually, everybody going near Trump or the vice president at the moment is gonna have to do that quick test. That should help a lot. So my hunch is they're rather safe. Unless, of course, everybody in the world gets it. This would be a tougher challenge. But still, if you test everybody that gets near them, they can probably avoid getting it until the vaccine arrives. Even if this gets out of hand. Which I really think it doesn't. I think we got this. You might have the impression that this is already out of hand and maybe you're living in the future and things got even worse from here. But when I saying out of hand, like I mean 70% of the world population actually getting the virus and having the virus, and a large part having it at once. And I really hope, I mean you're watching this in the future, and I really hope that wasn't the case. Plus, there's also a 75% chance that once you watch this video, Boris Johnson has already recovered, cases are going down, let's celebrate that. And while we celebrate it, we watch my other videos, sub to my channel and like this video. Also, conversation is part of the party, so write some comments.